Alright, so I've been staring at this for a little bit, and something I'm realizing is this bump stop is kind of really close to the tire, and I'm wondering if the suspension flexes side to side, is this tire going to hit this bump stop? Now, if I just pick up this tire, it gets kind of close, but it doesn't actually hit the tire. But if I take that tire off and drop that side, so now that that side of the axle is drooped down a lot more, now this tire can hit this bump stop, and this axle is nowhere near as fully flexed as it can be. So great, yet another thing we need to redo on this project. We need to redo the rear bump stops. So, last video of this project, we talked about having to replace these hubs and bearing carriers with bigger hubs and bigger bearing carriers because these hubs and bearing carriers are off a Polaris Sportsman, which is an ATV, and these are aluminum hubs, and I honestly don't think these hubs, which are designed for an ATV, will handle having 32-inch tires bolted onto these things. And I do have these. These are off a Polaris RZR 900, which is obviously a bigger vehicle, heavier vehicle, and this is made of steel. These are made of aluminum, so steel is obviously stronger. So all we have to do is just cut off the original mounts for the bearing carriers and weld on new mounts for these. I also bought brand new bearings for these and new brake calipers. Now, the question I've been asking myself is, should I also widen this thing? Because we are putting much bigger tires on this thing, should I widen it by a little bit to make sure it's not super tall and narrow, and we don't want this thing tipping over on some, uneven trails? And honestly, I can't really decide. Part of me is like, it's fine, leave it how it is. The other part of me is like, no, I should widen it by a little bit. But I'm trying to keep this thing the mini rock crawler project, and I can't call it mini if this thing's kind of huge. So what I'm going to do, because I can't really decide, should I leave it how it is or should I widen it by 4 or 6 inches? So I'm just going to widen it by 2 inches, which is an inch on either side, which is not much. We're not really going to be able to see a difference, but I will be able to say that I did widen it by a little bit because I don't know. Part of me just wants to make sure that this thing isn't super narrow and super tall and top heavy, and I don't want to be, as soon as I get on a trail that's sideways, I don't want to fall over. The other part of me is like, I want to keep this as small and mini as possible. Also, obviously, the smaller it is, the easier it is parking it in my temporary garages. So I'm just going to widen it by 2 inches and call it good. Holy crap. So another thing I'm doing is I'm replacing the original studs, which is these, with these bigger studs. I think the originals, these look to be about 3/8, and these are 1/2 inch. So yeah, bigger is stronger. We just need to drill the holes out to accept the bigger studs. Yeah, I have new bearings for these hubs, so let's swap them out. So I would just slide in the new bearing, but I kind of want to clean it. I mean, yeah, look at all the grime in there. So I'll let it cool down and I'll clean it and then I'll heat it back up. I'll also throw these in the freezer. I wasn't supposed to tack that yet, because now I can't get this one on. Whoops, hang on, cut that. not bad. We're off by 1/16 of an inch, but I think that's good enough. Alright, so after hours and hours and hours of making sure these are all symmetrical, making sure they're equally spaced apart, and making sure that they're pointed in a straight line, that they're not toed in or toed out or anything like that, we finally got these hubs pretty much mounted. Now, next thing is we need to do the top mounts, and I'm kind of looking at this tubing, and it's kind of is unfortunately just aiming down a little too much, therefore I need to cut it off here. I'll also cut this off, and redo this whole section, so therefore I can get it to where because we need the tubing right here, and not, down here. I'm kind of realizing that I'm having to modify so much of this original axle just to get this new setup to work, that it probably would have been a lot easier just to build a whole new axle from scratch instead of having to try and modify this one. But it's a little too late for that now, and I honestly thought that this was only going to need just a little bit of modification, but no, we're having to modify pretty much this whole thing. But for the front axle, I'll probably just build a new one of those from scratch, but for this one, we're almost done. We just need to do a little bit more modification, and then we can start, finalizing some things on here, and then this thing's hopefully done. Alright, so we got the top mounts for these bearing carriers pretty much finished. I will add as many mounts to this as possible because I just want to make sure this is nice and strong in this axle assembly, whatever we're deciding to call this thing. Now, honestly, I did not expect this to be taking as long as it is taking. This is actually the third day in this video that I've been working on this, and my goal for today is to try and finish this thing. So therefore we can start working on the front axle. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to install the brake calipers that I bought. Bought these on eBay, and they do fit on these bearing carriers. And I also want to install the CV axles, cut them to size. I don't want to weld them right now because I don't really want to do that right now. We can do that later. I also possibly want to install the shocks because next thing I need to do is add the rest of the tubing, this tubing that goes from here around here, and all the cross bracing in this. And I just want to make sure that any more tubing I add to this isn't in the way of anything. So let's add that stuff, do the cross bracing, do the other pieces of tubing on here. I'll do the other mounts for the bearing carriers. And then this thing's pretty much finished. Then we can take it apart, weld it all together. And then this thing is pretty much done after that, aside from having to weld the CV axles. But again, I don't really want to do that right now, so let's do it later. Now, I just tacked these together. This is not the permanent welds, obviously. Alright, so that is all the tubing I feel like I should add to this thing. This should be nice and strong enough now. So, next thing is let's take this all apart and weld it all together. Nice. Alright, so last night I was able to finish welding the axle together, axle frame, whatever we're calling this thing. Now, my original idea was I was gonna just slap this thing back together, put it back in the frame, and start working on the front axle in this video, but seeing as how this took so long to get this to this point, I'm almost thinking the better idea would be to put this thing back together and start welding the CV axles together. I kind of didn't really want to do that right now. I wanted to wait until the front is done, and then we had to weld the front CV axles and rear CV axles together. I'm almost thinking to weld the rear CV axles now, so if this thing's completely done, then in the next video of this project, then we can start working on the front axle. So yeah, let's put this thing mostly back together, and I'll cut giant chamfers on the CV axles, and I guess let's just start welding them together. Alright, wish me luck. I didn't really have that greatest success last time I did this. Hopefully I won't have any issues like that this time. Alright, so a couple hours later, I got all the TIG welding done. Now, just to be 100% sure that this is going to be strong enough, I'm going to MIG weld these on, because, yeah, I do not want this to break. So yesterday I was able to finish welding the CV axles together. That surprisingly didn't take as long as I thought it was going to take, which was nice. Now, to be truly done with this rear axle assembly, so therefore we can put it back in the frame and don't have to do anything further to this, we need to do a couple things to this differential, which means we need to take this thing apart again, but I guess it's better to do it now than to have to do it later. There are just a couple spots where it kind of gets a little bound up, so I thought there was going to be some stuff in here, but it actually looks pretty clean. But I'm still going to, clean it. There's some sludge right there that definitely needs cleaned out. And then I'll put some silicone around the edges to seal it. All I have is Honda Bond, but that definitely should be good enough. Alright, last thing we gotta do to this differential is notice how there isn't any holes on the input like there is on the original one. This hole lines up with this hole, and this is what actually holds the drive shaft onto here. I use a bolt, but I think you're supposed to use a roll pin or something like that. Now we definitely need to have this hole on the new one, so therefore the drive shaft won't just fall off. But to drill a hole through here, it's gonna be a little complicated because this is slightly hardened steel. Now, in the past, I've used modified masonry bits to drill through hardened steel, so let's hope this works again for this thing. If this doesn't work, I don't really have a plan B, so let's hope it works. Maybe I just need to get through the first hardened layer. Maybe this is case hardened. Let me put this in the vise because it's, yeah, kind of all over the place. Yeah, I'll admit that was kind of a challenge. It did take me well over an hour to drill through that, but I eventually got through it. It was only case hardened, so once I got through the hardened outer surface, the middle was not soft, but soft enough to drill through. So now that the differential is pretty much finished, now we can start working. Aside from we need to add oil to this thing, but we can do that later. Let's start working on reassembly of, whoopsies. Don't break this thing. Let's start working on no, stop falling. Let's start working on reassembly of the axle for the last time, and then we can put it back in the frame. Alright, that's a little heavy. Alright, so I just want to see what it looks like with the tires spinning up. Alright, that is forward. So that's high range. Not very fast. This is low range. Yeah, we're definitely going to have to do something with the gearing. And we have reversed. This is low range. And, I mean, it's definitely low. So this thing looks pretty much the same as it did at the end of the last video of this project, but at least the rear axle is done, everything works. I still need to hook up the rear brakes, but we can do that later. Also, I still need to figure out what we're doing with the bump stops, because, you know, like we saw in the beginning of this video, that these tires do hit these bump stops. I know I widened it by a little bit, but I still think they're going to hit, so I may just cut these off. I may just not even run bump stops. I mean, do we really need them? Because I will be honest, every time I hit a big bump, I slam down on the bump stops, and it definitely makes this a very uncomfortable ride. We're also going to really try to fix the rear suspension on this, because there's just way too much dampening, and it kind of just makes it a very uncomfortable ride. So, but next video of this project, we can start working on the front axle. That one's definitely going to be the challenging one, because I need to figure out some way to put power steering in the front. I'm almost pondering the easiest way to do it would be to have the power steering unit on the axle itself. So we'll kind of see how that's going to work. I don't know. But yeah, guys, that's it for this video. Thank y'all for watching. I'll see ya in the next video.